Welcome along to Anxiety Month. I'm chatting with Kate Driver. Kate, tell us what you do, and then we'll talk a bit about anxiety.
Hi, Emily. Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm a naturopath and I called myself a women's health coach or a perimenopause practitioner. I specialise in perimenopause and menopause. Um, and I consult in South Australia and I consult online and I have programs and packages and memberships and things like that as well.
Cool. So this month we're talking about anxiety, which, I mean, it's such a big one, isn't it? So many women are absolutely floored by anxiety as they come into perimenopause. And maybe some of them have never had any experience of anxiety beforehand. And suddenly, like,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I've just seen it so often. Um, and look, personally, with myself, I actually have always had anxiety, and it was probably worse in my earlier years. So for me, it wasn't, anything really that different. But for a lot of women, yeah, they might think, oh, wow, I'm always really quite chilled out, and nothing ever really worries me. And then they have this anxiety, and they're not really sure if it, firstly, if it is perimenopause or if it's just because, to just do with their overwhelm, just in their life, like stress and just trying to fit too much in. But with a lot of women, because the progesterone is probably one of the biggest things that affects the anxiety, it drops quite dramatically. And with a lot of women, it can happen sort of in the early 40s and start going down slowly. But when you go through periods of stress and prolonged stress, because it's accumulative as well, that actually depletes your progesterone faster. That's what happened to me. Like I would say in my early 40s, I had lower progesterone already, even though I wouldn't have called myself perimenopausal. So that contributed to insomnia and sleep issues for me way back then. That was like 15 years ago. Um, but yes, so some women can have a very gradual decline in the progesterone and start feeling anxious over time, or they might just get a big drop in the progesterone and then start feeling really anxious all of a sudden. And that can also affect their sleep. But the cortisol, which also increases as we go through this age, is partly responsible too. And some of those other stress hormones, the adrenaline and noradrenaline that the adrenal glands produce. So I talk to most people about, or women about their adrenal glands and their progesterone levels, and then wondering whether, something like their thyroid gland is involved, maybe because these glands all work together. Yeah.
and I think that's something that a lot of us overlook, don't we? We sort of think, oh, it's perimenopause, it's just to do with estrogen and maybe some progesterone. And we kind of don't necessarily think about how the adrenals are involved, how cortisol's affecting it, and it is so, I mean, an entire entity, aren't we? So it's all linked.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. All the hormones have to play in harmony. So they're all like an orchestra. And this is what I keep telling women as well, because, and even, and not putting anybody down at all, but so sometimes people in the medical profession, I'm not saying anybody here does it, but, maybe some general GPs, they would just isolate one symptom and isolate one area and not really look at anything else. Like, oh, yeah, well, this is your issue. Here's something for that. But then they don't really look at all how every other system of their body can be involved. And so this is why so many women get so many symptoms with perimenopause and menopause, because in fact, this drop and the change in hormones, I mean, estrogen can fluctuate, as we all know by now, and when you get the estrogen dominance symptoms, it can be worse than the estrogen deficiency, but it can fluctuate up and down through perimenopause. And so, that's going to affect everything, including your thyroid function, and the adrenals and the gut bacteria, and the fact that you're not actually feeling relaxed and as chilled out as you used to be. And if you go into perimenopause with adrenal, what we'd call adrenal dysfunction or adrenal exhaustion, then you're going to experience more symptoms. And so I've done some videos before and talked to lots of women about, is it perimenopause or is it just adrenal exhaustion? Are you exhausted? And these adrenal glands, which produce the stress hormones, they're actually responsible for taking over what your ovaries have been doing all this time. So they've got to be healthy and strong. So when your hormones drop, the DHEA that they release helps manage and balance your hormones after, they completely drop the progesterone and the estrogen. So they've got to be healthy to help these hormones stay balanced. And when the adrenals get weakened, and the progesterone drops, it also affects your thyroid gland. And hopefully most women know that the thyroid affects things like your weight and energy, but it also affects your whole cardiovascular system. So if, for instance, if your cholesterol starts going up, it could be your thyroid. If your liver enzymes start going up, it could be your thyroid. If what was the other thing I was going to say? Yeah, if you're sleeping. So there's a whole range of things. And if some women might start to get sort of gut symptoms or constipation or things like that. And that also can be even something called subclinical hypothyroidism, where it doesn't get picked up by doctors because it's not strong enough to really show up too much in a blood test, but women start getting symptoms earlier on, 5-10 years before perhaps a full-blown thyroid issue could start happening.
Yeah. So in terms of the anxiety, what would be, let's say, sort of 3 to 5 things that people can do today that they can just start to do to sort of feel less crippled by the anxiety?
Okay, well, the first thing we really need to look at is, I suppose, because all of this is affected by the drop in the progesterone and the increasing cortisol, that's what I would focus on, because it will have a flow-on effect to everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So to reduce cortisol, we can look at things like meditation and deep breathing. And I'm sure most people know how to do that sort of thing, but many people just forget about it and rush through their day and then jump into bed and then wonder why they can't sleep and they feel anxious and they feel anxious all day. So slowing down, even having a few minutes throughout the day, just deep breathing and calming the mind and focusing on something that makes you feel happy can be helpful to reduce your cortisol. So deep breathing, meditation, as we all know, that actually, does it. Even 11 minutes a day can actually really dramatically reduce stress hormones.
Mm-hmm.
And then even things like exercise. I mean, exercise, even though when you're exercising, it increases cortisol, afterwards the cortisol will be reduced, especially if you're anxious. Like, I think that's one of the best antidotes to anxiety and depression naturally is actually exercise, whatever type you like. I'm not saying you have to hit the gym, but if you want to go for a walk or a bike ride or a swim or do some yoga or whatever you do, anything that you find that's enjoyable, then it's going to reduce your cortisol over time, and it can really help with sleep as well, but throughout the day and reduce anxiety. But then you also want to look at with foods that you're eating. So the most important things, I mean, I don't want to, we all have to increase really healthy foods, but I don't want to talk about too many things to avoid, but it's really important with anxiety that women don't have too many stimulants like coffee and alcohol and sugar, because this increases the stress hormones, increases cortisol. That's why people get a kick out of it and feel great, for a while. But it will also increase anxiety. So that's something to look at, reducing all the stimulants. And I think that sometimes it's the hardest thing for women to do because they're a bit addicted to them sometimes. And we've talked about, and I won't go into this tonight, but in another video, if anybody wants to go back over it, a few years ago, we talked about histamine foods and how that can cause insomnia. Well, it can also cause, high histamine foods if some women have got intolerance to it, which is really common at this age. That can also cause anxiety and lots of other symptoms, but sometimes we need to look at those sort of foods and reducing them a little bit in the diet as well. And probably the third thing I'd look at is supplement. I mean, the supplements, you can't beat magnesium when you're looking at reducing cortisol. And when we want to produce our more progesterone, and we want to reduce cortisol and decrease those stress hormones, the magnesium along with potassium, vitamin B6 and glutamine and zinc, they're all really a good combination together to help us produce more progesterone more easily, but also help reduce the cortisol. So even supplement wise, and if any ladies are on any other medications or have any severe health issues, just check with your health practitioner that it's safe to take.
Awesome. That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Kate. I feel like we've given people lots and lots of information, but some really good actionable things as well.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm glad. Thanks for listening. Thanks, Emily.